NFL free agency underway as of yesterday afternoon, the legal tampering window around the league. And despite Twitter being down and the updates slow to come at the very start, we saw a flurry of moves in free agency yesterday. And of course, Donnie, we'll break it all down here on the early line in this opening hour. But we start with the most important position in football and the biggest quarterback name in free agency. Sam Darnold, after a career year in Minneapolis, has a new home. The newest quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks, after dealing Geno Smith to the Las Vegas Raiders on Friday night to set the stage for an opening at the QB spot, Sam Darnold signs a 3-year, $100.5 million deal to become the newest starting quarterback for the Seahawks. Again, a career year in Minnesota gets Sam Darnold paid. He will look to provide that stable floor in the Pacific Northwest these next few seasons.
Yeah, interesting to see what that offense does now, because you have a pretty good stable of running backs there, a decent offensive line. You figure you have your franchise quarterback. We'll see if he plays as well in the regular season as he did last year with the Minnesota Vikings. Jackson Smith-Njigba, the lone standing guy, you could say, at the wide receiver position, but that's what you have a draft for, draft capital, and you're going to fill in the blanks there. So this could be a reset of Seattle, who won 10 games last year and felt that their roster wasn't strong enough to compete over the next couple of years, primarily because they didn't think their quarterback was worth as much money as he thought he was getting here. So I do believe they got a younger quarterback, which obviously they did. Darnold's younger than Geno Smith, and also at the same time, probably figuring they paid him $33.5 million when Geno was probably asking for around 40 to 40 plus at this point here. And also didn't just cut him here, traded him and got draft capital back. I really like what the Seattle Seahawks are doing, because I'm now under the impression as I get older, you're either trying to build for a future championship or you're doing it wrong. If you feel your organization doesn't have the necessary tools to compete for a deep playoff run, which means making the playoffs and winning at least one playoff game, why not scrap it, start over, and try to rebuild from scratch? That's a healthy organization in Seattle. I like the moves they're making.
Let's start with the player first, and then we'll get to the finances behind it, because that's also a pretty equal part of the conversation. Sam Darnold last year for the Vikings was brought in maybe as a bridge quarterback to provide some veteran guidance for the young J.J. McCarthy, who Minnesota is in love with, drafted 10th overall, had a great preseason debut, but at some point in that preseason opener, tore his meniscus and was out for the entirety of his rookie campaign in the NFL. So Sam Darnold quickly goes from maybe in a quarterback battle, maybe a veteran leader, to now the guy for Minnesota. Not much was expected. He leads the Vikings to 14 wins with a career best season. Darnold, of course, drafted 3rd overall by the Jets back in 2018. Never fully fulfilled that promise in New York with his struggles, or in Carolina, his next stop. But after a career year as a backup in San Francisco, he makes his way to the Vikings. And you see those numbers, if we can go back to them, 4,319. And in 7 years in the NFL, Sam Darnold has actually started double-digit games 5 of 7 years, including 2024 DRS. Last year was the only time he threw for more than 3,025 yards, more than 20 touchdowns. Those were the second fewest interceptions in his 5 years, starting at least 10 games. A career year by all accord. But there was some question, of course, after some disappointing performances in the 2 biggest games for the Vikings this season ago. The regular season finale against the Detroit Lions, that opening round playoff game against the LA Rams. Sam Darnold went from being, maybe this guy has a lot left in the tank as a face of the franchise, to, okay, maybe a consistent quarterback, but doesn't really elevate the ceiling. But as Donnie has really laid out, Seattle's not all that interested in elevating the ceiling, but looking for a consistent QB to help in this rebuild, restructuring in the Northwest.
Exactly. And the NFL, the good part is, it's not like the NBA where sometimes you got to tank years and years and years. You can have quick rebuilds all the way, because the one thing the NFL does appropriately is, if you're a bad football team, you get the benefit of an easier schedule and also the benefit of a higher draft pick to help you do that. Now, understanding this, are we expecting Sam Darnold to be the exact same quarterback in the regular season he was last year with Minnesota, now in Seattle? That's a tall task, because you have the best wide receiver in football, a very competent running game, a great play caller, and weapons all around him. Now, still, as I said, you're going to get a solid offensive line in Seattle, a good running game, and a very good young wide receiver to grow with. Because understand this, growing with Geno Smith will turn 35 next year. That's not a plan. growing with a player in his late 20s that you feel finally unlocks something and you can get him in his prime for the next 6 to 7 to 8 years if things go well. That's a perfect rebuild. And also, you didn't go out and say, hey, quarterback starters, $50 million. You got him for $33.5 million, a valuable starting quarterback. And as I said, you didn't cut Geno Smith. You flipped him for a draft pick as well. This is a good day for the Seattle Seahawks and their fans.
Clint Kubiak hired as the offensive coordinator by Seattle this offseason. He was off to a great start last year in New Orleans. It is a very similar system where Kubiak spent time in Minnesota under Kevin O'Connell in 2023 with Kyle Shanahan when the backup QB for the 49ers was Sam Darnold as the passing game coordinator. So there is familiarity there, of course, for Sammy D. Now in terms of the finances, DRS, 3-year, $100.5 million. Because as you and I were getting everybody ready here on TEL and across the SportsGrid network for free agency, we said Sam Darnold, top quarterback in the market as it pertains to free agency. The question was where, Seattle, and how much. 3-year, $100.5 million, $33.5 million per year, $55 million guarantee. I asked you this very question yesterday. What do you think is fair market value? What would you be comfortable spending on Sam Darnold? You said somewhere between $30 and $35 million, right smack dab in the middle. It feels like a fair deal for Sam Darnold to take the reins in Seattle.
And also understand this, like these are reworkable numbers. So Darnold goes out next year, makes the Pro Bowl, and he's your franchise guy. He's getting re-upped again next year for a longer extension. It's almost like the bottom of the basement saying, you know what, I got a starter who was very good last year, and I just had a starter here that's a little bit older, and I didn't want to pay as much. I think it's a win in both spots, because if he does flame out, it's not a contract that is really going to set back your franchise all that much. So I do want to see what the actual contract details come out, what the guaranteed monies go up against, what some of those voidable years on the back end. But today, if you ask me, is Seattle a better football team moving forward than what they were? I'll say yes.
50-1 yesterday to win a Super Bowl. Now 46-1. The market, like Donnie, loves the moves that John Schneider has made in the last few days. Now to New York. Justin Fields is a Jet next. From Sam the Seahawk to now Justin the Jet. Justin Fields testing the free agency waters, makes his way to New York on a 2-year, $40 million deal to take the reins under new guidance in New York with Gang Green. $30 million guaranteed. Justin Fields, who just turned 26 earlier this month, about a week ago, after 4 years in the NFL, started the first 6 games for Pittsburgh a season ago. Now the newest QB for the New York Jets. Donnie, you have been fond of this new regime for this Jets franchise. Aaron Glenn, the new head coach. Darren Muji, the new GM. What did you make of this move and the signing of Justin Fields yesterday?
I thought it was great. Now, let's understand both parties here involved. Like, Justin Fields feels like, I came into the NFL, didn't get a lot of help in Chicago. Then I go over to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I never even got a chance to play with them. So it's interesting that you were hearing behind the scenes Justin Fields saying, I'm not going to play for the Steelers unless you tell me, I'm the starter. I don't want any competition. You danced around it last year. I had a winning record. I didn't get to play much there. And it was apparent that you didn't like me as the franchise. So I thought it was his best to move on. But also, you saw me put out on Twitter and talk about it yesterday saying, now that you have different components in Pittsburgh and added wide receivers, it's up to you to get a true pocket passer. And Fields wasn't that. So the next best move was, okay, I'm going to get out of town. Where can I go? Go to a franchise that's not going to have any pressure next year to win, which means you can work out the kinks, you can put your work ethic in, you can show that organization you can be that franchise guy on a good contract for him, but a look-see contract per se for the Jets themselves. The Jets are coming in here with Garrett Wilson, and as you said, he liked that move. Garrett Wilson likes anything other than Aaron Rodgers, who says, I'm the number one wide receiver here. You brought all your friends in. All you do is throw them the football. Anything would be better than Aaron Rodgers. So, yes, he's going to be excited. But also understand this. If Justin Fields fails, it means they didn't have a good season, and they can find their quarterback of the future in the draft. If Justin Fields is good, you go, wow, I just signed my guy, didn't have to use draft capital, found my franchise guy. Now let's build around this guy and give him the weapons he never had in Chicago. Because most people just see Justin Fields, average player in the NFL. What are the Jets actually doing? Understand what the prognosis for the Jets is this year. Clean house, find young talent that's willing to win. And if you do, start to build for the future. We said it all along, Ben, at least I did as well. When you get a new head coach in town, It's okay for you to say, hey, let's keep everybody around because this is a free year. They got right to business here. And the Jets, finally, as I said, for their fan base, you got your franchise back. It's time for the good times to roll. It might not equate to wins and losses this year, but I love what we're doing as a foundation for this team, Ben.
Yeah, no doubt about it, DRS. And Garrett Wilson, fond of this move with Justin Fields for good reason. In the 2 years they shared together in Columbus, even in the shortened year in 2020, Garrett Wilson averaged more than 90 yards per game, had 8 receiving touchdowns in only 8 games for the Buckeyes. Justin Fields was prolific, historic during his time at Ohio State. Hopes to replicate that in New York. And you know what is so fascinating, Donnie, about the Jets? The world of expectation. Every single NFL eyeball and notoriety on the Jets the previous 2 seasons because of Aaron Rodgers. Those expectations, in large part, are out the door, or at least maybe more fitting for a franchise that has not made it to the postseason in 14 consecutive years, finishing with 5 wins or fewer half of those 14 seasons. Justin Fields can go in there, provide some stability, has the experience. I still have belief in his ability to play the quarterback spot and see where things go for the New York Jets. The numbers are not gaudy during his 4 years in the National Football League. Last year started the opening 6 games for the Steelers. They went 4-2. He was benched in favor of Russell Wilson. Frankly, Donnie, in those 6 starts, he only threw for $160 plus twice. 5 touchdowns to only an interception in those opening 6 games. Did run the football for at least 27 yards on the ground. Of course, a great athlete at the QB spot in 5 of those 6, 55 plus in 3 of those 5 games, had 5 rushing scores. You would think the offense can be orchestrated to design things around Justin Fields and distribute the football where there is still a lot of offensive and young talent for New York entering this season.
So you know what you love the most about this? Because we're handicappers as well. Like last year, Jaden Daniels gets drafted to Washington. All I could think of was, my goodness, this guy might be 1,000-yard, running back per se at the running back position. And he did well in that. You take a look at Justin Fields and you say, well, is he going to get benched at any time? Like, no. Adrian Martinez, Jordan Travis, and Tyrod Taylor, the other quarterbacks on the roster right now with Justin Fields. You know what that means? Barring injury, Ben, that's 17 starts for Justin Fields. I think he's going to be a maniac on the ground for the Jets next year.
I'm going to be very hopeful for what he can do. I look forward to see what the passing yards props are. I'm going to bet some Justin Fields. I'm believing in the Jets once again. Other huge news from the opening day of free agency, including a trade next. More moves yesterday on the official start of free agency outside of just quarterback signings. Plenty to break down, and even just free agency deals as well. A blockbuster deal between the Commanders and the Houston Texans yesterday. Laremy Tunsil, in 6 years in Houston, 5 times a Pro Bowler, traded to the Commanders to now be the blindside blocker for Jaden Daniels. A big deal for Washington. One DRS, as I said in the opening segment of this show, kind of leaves me scratching my head for what Houston necessarily is doing. In return, as you see there, they get a lot of draft capital back. That's a good sign. A 2025 third-round pick and a 7th-rounder this year, and the next season a 2nd and a 4th-rounder. The Commanders get one of the more consistent left tackles in the NFL over the last 3 to 4 years. 6 seasons in Houston, 5 times a Pro Bowler for Laremy Tunsil.
Yeah, it's an interesting move overall because you're right about this. You look at that Houston offense, and again, you're trying to protect your quarterback, and to have a very good left tackle is very important. And also, they're worth their weight in gold. You're going to pay them a lot of money. You hope they stay there a long time because that's one of those positions you can play into your prime, well into your 30s, 33, 34, 35. We see that all the time. Now, having said that, too, sometimes it is a little bit of a buyer beware situation. Like, what do the Texans know that nobody else knows, why they would move on knowing that they have a franchise quarterback they want to protect? Well, number one, you're going to clear out some cap space. Number two, you are going to get some pieces for the, I don't want to say the rebuilding process. That's not right for Houston. They're right in the middle of that threshold where they think they can make Super Bowl runs. But there are components that go into it here. I'm just wondering. But I'm going to buy it just as it is. Very good move here for Washington. A little bit puzzling here for what Houston's doing. But as I said again, sometimes you make these deals, understand, like, we don't know if this guy's going to hold on. We don't know about his work ethic here. Maybe some of the financials are a little bit too much for us here. We can spend and allocate our money elsewhere, but it's an interesting move. But if you buy it on face value, it's a good move for Washington. Made the NFC Championship game last year, now looking to get beyond that, loading up on more talent, helps you do that.
Of course, Laremy Tunsil's a name that everybody knows, going back to his draft day in 2016 because of a rather infamous picture. But when he has performed in the NFL, he's been sensational. 6 years in Houston, 5 times a Pro Bowler. As I shared to start, the 2 best tackles in the NFL the last 3 years in terms of pressure rate allowed. Tristan Wirfs, who is the first player in NFL history to be a first-team All-Pro performer at both left and right tackle, and Laremy Tunsil, not all that far behind. Yes, had a lot of false starts last year. I will trade some false starts to keep my quarterback upright because Tunsil was about the only guy in Houston trying to keep C.J. Stroud upright. He was sacked 52 times, second most around the NFL, only trailing Caleb Williams, and we have seen what the Bears have done. They haven't said, let's trade our best offensive lineman away for draft capital. Let's bolster the offensive line. C.J. Stroud looked pedestrian in his sophomore season in the NFL because of how much pressure he was under year over year, game by game by game. Does not make sense to me if you are the Commanders. A great deal to protect Jaden Daniels. And Washington did make some moves yesterday as well. DRS, the Commanders will be looked at this year, of course, as an NFC contender, a 19-1 price on Washington right now to win Super Bowl 60, 4th best around the NFC.
Yeah, I want to see what they do in the draft. They probably are loading up on defense because that wasn't a very good defense last year. Lost a lot of key pieces this year. Their offense is right now. Now it's time to spend some time and focus on that defense, which they rebuilt last year, which was better than the year before. New regime change comes in. So I trust what Peters, the GM, is doing at this time because you want to take care of the offense first. That's most important because Jaden Daniels is the future of that franchise. Now focus on the defense here. And I like a team that's like, hey, we were young last year. We made a run. Let's not go too head over our skis here at this point. No, they're going in. They're spending money in free agency to make sure that offense is shored up. Now spending some time on the defense. Quality franchise right now. They're on the rise.
A wide receiver, by the way, offensively for Washington, who finished off last year being a main component of their playoff run, De'Ami Brown signing a 1-year deal in Jacksonville. But up front, the Commander signing Javon Kinlaw, who was released by the 49ers. Adam Peters used to work in the front office in San Francisco, brings Kinlaw to Washington to bolster the interior of that D-line. Jonathan Allen leaves. He's now in Minnesota, but Deron Payne's still there. Bobby Wagner brought back, the veteran who had an all-pro season this year outside the nation's capital. DRS, speaking of a team trying to bolster that defense, it's exactly what the Patriots are doing right now under Mike Vrabel, the defensive-minded head coach. The Patriots with more than $120 million in cap space this offseason, by far the most to spend around the NFL, and they're making good on that money. The guy that you mentioned yesterday from Philadelphia, a very successful 4-year span in Philly on his rookie deal, but knew he was going to get paid. Milton Williams, reported early to maybe go to Carolina, finds his way to Foxborough on a 4-year, $104 million deal, $63 million guaranteed. Donnie, Howie Roseman would have loved to brought him back, but that money Philadelphia just couldn't afford.
Yeah, you knew he wasn't coming back along with Josh Sweat, who signed with the Arizona Cardinals. But let's focus on the New England Patriots. This is the interesting part. Like, the Patriots defense technically was never really the issue. The goal in the NFL is to get a good young quarterback, which if they think Drake May is that guy, surround him with talent. The offensive line, outrageously bad. The wideouts, completely inept. The running back situation, pedestrian. I look at them today. The exact same things here. So their free agent money was spent on defense when you take a look at other teams saying, I have my young quarterback. Let me get all the confidence in the world and make sure that side of the football is correct. Then we'll focus on defense. There's a long way to go in free agency. It's a lot of fill in the blank spots here. You have draft capital you can go, maybe even make a trade, but you need to focus on that offense. The issue is not the defense, which they shored up. Mill Williams is a quality defensive young prospect that should be really good in the NFL. Landry was a great pickup, familiar with Mike Vrabel. And also the defensive backs, you pick up Carlton Davis III, great ones. And they have your cornerback set, your defensive line set. You bring over Spillane, like the defense, but that offense still looks wretched right now. Let's see what they do.
They signed the veteran offensive lineman in Morgan Moses. He is 34 years old. Mac Hollins remains in the division after 1 year in Buffalo. The shoeless wonder now finds his way to the Patriots. You would assume, DRS, that other moves made by New England in the draft will focus now offensively. New England holds that 4th overall pick, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I believe it's 4th overall. Is that going to be an offensive lineman? Will Campbell, Armin Membu off the board first. We shall see. But bolstering that defense under Mike Vrabel with a ton of money able to be spent throughout this offseason. Josh Sweat signs a big deal in Arizona, 4 years, north of $75 million. Carlton Davis III makes his way to the Pats. In return, DJ Reed signs with Detroit on a pretty similar deal to what Davis got as well. He bolsters that secondary for the Lions. Byron Murphy back in Minnesota. Chris Godwin, maybe the top free agent wide receiver after Devontae Adams signs with L.A. and T. Higgins placed under the franchise tag, returns to Tampa on a 3-year, $66 million deal. Donnie, many people thought he could have gone out and got more in the market, but after a season-ending injury this past year, comfortable to remain with the Buccaneers, where he has been for the entirety of his 8 years in the NFL.
Exactly. Making good money there, living in the state of Florida, very tax-friendly there, nice weather, and you got a quarterback that's an absolute gunslinger. Why would you not want to come back to that situation? It was the perfect fit, and I don't think too many people realize that he wasn't going anywhere, and it's like, hey, he got the free agency. At the minute free agency happened, signs right back with the Buccaneers. That's where he's supposed to be, and that's a good move for the Bucs.
We'll have a few more thoughts on free agency and show you where the Super Bowl markets are as we continue to go early in this offseason on the other side of the break. But you saw there at the bottom, Dan Moore Jr., offensive lineman, making his way to Tennessee. Maybe the best offensive guard in the free agency market. Aaron Banks leaves San Francisco, will help protect Jordan Love and pave the way for Josh Jacobs in Green Bay. The Bears also making some moves yesterday. Beef along both sides of the football. A look at the Super Bowl odds as free agency rolls on next. Live right here on the early line on SportsGrid. Free agency now underway in full force around the National Football League. Any update we receive on this Tuesday morning, because we expect some, we will bring you here on the early line. But Donnie, just a quick moment. After the flurry of moves we have seen yesterday in terms of free agency signings, and of course in the past 72 hours or so in those blockbuster moves and contract extensions over the weekend in the NFL, an updated look at those Super Bowl 60 prices. The reigning champs remain the Super Bowl 60 favorites. The Philadelphia Eagles at plus 650. The Chiefs and the Ravens tied for the second best price at 7-1. The Bills plus 750, and the Lions round out the top 5 at 10-1. Those prices have really remained pretty stagnant, a couple of cents here and there, but the top 5 really has remained unchanged. It's where you go after that. The 49ers 16-1. Moving back ever so slightly in the market. We're still waiting on the Bengals to sign Jamar Chase, to sign T. Higgins. They do bring back B.J. Hill to anchor the interior of the D-line yesterday. Okay, the Commanders have certainly made some move, and the Packers and the Rams, big winners so far, it would seem, in free agency, both at a 22-1 number.
Yeah, let's understand, too. Like, I'm glad you started with the Bengals, 17-1. Let's just say they do bring back Chase and Higgins. Is that, like, exciting? Like, does that mean they go back to, like, 13-1? Like, I think that's already baked into the price. Like, that's as good as it's going to get here. Now, can that offense turn heads? Yes, but they're not going to stop anybody on defense. And all you need is one little hamstring injury for either one of those wideouts that misses 4 to 5 games, and it's a wrap once again on the season. So I'm certainly not high on them, but I agree with the premise of you don't win championships in free agency, right? Eagles, Chiefs, Ravens, what did they do in free agency? not a blip on the radar, and quite frankly, lost players at this point. But you're factoring in that there's still a long way to go to fill in the free agency period here. You have the draft coming up, and trades will be made. And also, when you start and they say, wow, the Eagles lost Josh Sweat and Milton Williams and, can't afford to keep certain guys. Understand this. That offense is intact. Like, the only guy they might miss out on next year is Mekhi Becton, who hasn't signed yet on the first day of free agency, which tells you a lot, which means he was probably asking for a lot of money. The Eagles said, you know what? Get out in that free agency and know what your worth is. Maybe we can work out a deal. But as long as that offense is intact, the Eagles will be fine. As long as the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, they'll be okay. As long as the Ravens have Lamar Jackson, as long as, here we go, the Bills. What did they do? Restructure the quarterback, re-sign their own guys. As long as they have Josh Allen, a quarterback, they'll be fine. Quarterbacks win in this game here. You don't win free agency Super Bowls. You win Super Bowls when you take the field with a complete football team and a solid quarterback. So I like to see where some of these teams sit, and these numbers will change based on some moves that are made, but no way should be like, the Eagles plus 650 should move behind, let's just say, the Commanders at a 19-1 price because they made some moves and additions here. I see where they're at.
The Bills adding a wide receiver in Josh Palmer, spent many years, of course, in Los Angeles with the Chargers. What we did not mention in New England, Joshua Dobbs, some veteran experience in the QB room, 2-year, $8 million deal. Jimmy Garoppolo makes his way back to Los Angeles. The Rams feel pretty set. They also add Poona Ford up front along the defensive line. I highlighted the Chicago Bears before the break. You could say the theme of this offseason so far, beef along both sides of the football in the trenches. Drew Dahlman, the best center on the free agency market from Atlanta, makes his way to Chicago. 3-year, $42 million deal. On the other side, longtime fan favorite in Atlanta, Grady Jarrett, released yesterday by the Falcons, quickly finds a new home in Chicago. And Dayo Odeyingbo, a promising young interior defensive lineman from Indianapolis, now in Chicago. The Bears making some very sound moves this offseason, their first under Ben Johnson.
I love it because Ben Johnson just came from an organization that said, we are going to invest in the offensive line, and that's going to take us to the promised land. Does Detroit win a Super Bowl yet? No. But you see, protect your quarterback, you can run your offense. The same exact thing is taking place in Chicago. Protect your quarterback, you'll be able to run your offense. The weapons are there. Look at the great teams in the NFL. The Philadelphia Eagles just won. They absolutely dominated in trench warfare last year in the NFL. If you win the line of scrimmage, chances are you have a chance, a better chance, by the way, to win the football game itself. But for me with Chicago, you did the one thing you had to do, invest in your quarterback. And it doesn't mean getting a superstar wide receiver or running back. Keep him upright. It's the best investment you can have. And Chicago's doing that.
Yes, they certainly are, DRS. The Bears at a 35-1 price right now to win Super Bowl 60. Fascinating to see what their NFC North price is and what we all expect to be a highly competitive division. What the win total is for Ben Johnson's first year as a head coach. Indianapolis making some moves in their secondary. Cam Bynum, the safety who is a great dancer from Minnesota, now heads to Indy. Charvarius Ward, now there as well at the cornerback spot. Plenty of moves still to be made. Donnie, when you think about the outstanding free agents, if you will, a lot of focus still at the quarterback spot. Where does Aaron Rodgers end up? A lot of speculation and steam behind the Steelers and the Giants. What does that mean for Russell Wilson? His market, a little bit more up in the air.
It is. And also understand this. You start to get some of that buyer's market as opposed to, like you're saying, okay, free agents are ruling the roost in day number one. That's the top of the talent. The longer these guys wait out here, that price is going to drop. So it's interesting to see. We never knew really what Aaron Rodgers' motivation was because he's one of the highest paid players in the history of the sport if you look at total contract numbers. But he's at the point of the career that he goes, I have to sell myself to a football team. Give me the vet minimum. If it works out midway through the season, let's go extend it 2 or 3 years at some top money. Like, I'm interested to see where he goes because I need him, it sort of feels like, in Pittsburgh right now, because that gives that a lightning bolt franchise that says, was it really just an anomaly where, hey, look, it wasn't really my fault in the Jets. Let me prove it wrong and go to a more stable franchise like the Pittsburgh Steelers? Or does he go to the Steelers and get sacked and can't move in the pocket and blames everybody else and is no longer their quarterback by week 8 and is cut at this point? So that is the big move that we're waiting to see, is where Aaron Rodgers actually winds up to help or harm his new franchise.
I would think the Steelers would be wise to avoid all of that headache. I think Mike Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers have respect for one another. I'm not sure it would be the most successful partnership. I think this version of Aaron Rodgers at 41 years old is what we have seen his last 3 seasons in the NFL. His final in Green Bay, the ruptured Achilles in 2023, and rather mediocre play that certainly does not elevate a franchise expected to be a playoff contender in 2024. Just my 2 cents. A man about town, that's what you can call Mike Blewitt. A man about conference tournament week. Last week in college hoops. We'll talk some college basketball with Big Blue in our next segment together to round out this second hour. But of course, one of the leading football voices here on the SportsGrid Network. We get Blewitt's take on the start of free agency around the National Football League with a flurry of moves yesterday and plenty more to come. Blewitt, as always, thank you for joining us here on this Tuesday on the Early Line on SportsGrid.
Thank you. Excited to talk college hoop in a few minutes. Nice job with the WAC and the MAC and everything else there. We can touch on those in a few minutes. But obviously, free agency got off to a rousing start yesterday. Certain teams just furiously scooping up players. Teams like the Patriots, who did a really nice job of getting some tone setters, specifically for Mike Vrabel's defense in Williams, Spillane, and Davis, one player at each level that he wants to come in and help him be a more physical football team. The Vikings really shoring up their line play, Jonathan Allen, and now possibly Javon Hargrave going to Minnesota's defensive line. And the Bears obviously investing very heavily in Caleb Williams' protection scheme. So teams really going after needs, but I would caution everybody that's very excited right now, continue to be excited. Think that these are the moves that are going to help your team win a championship, but it's just a piece. We had a coaching shuffle, free agency, then the draft. Those all fit together to form the puzzle.
Blue, really well said, right? Offseason optimism is always a thing. Hope can be dangerous at times, but also beautiful. These are not going to help you win a game at this very moment. It has not won you a game. You hope you are building the foundational pieces to make your football organization a successful one. Certainly the hope in Seattle with the acquisition and signing of a new quarterback in Sam Darnold, a 3-year, $100.5 million deal. Of course, Blue, in the past 72 hours, a ton of sweeping changes with the Seahawks. They trade away Geno Smith on Friday to Las Vegas. They trade away DK Metcalf to your Steelers on Sunday evening and then sign the top quarterback in the free agency market for a deal worth about $33.5 million per year. How would you grade the move to bring Sam to Seattle?
I do like it. What's interesting to me about it is that apparently Geno Smith was offered a very similar deal to stay in Seattle, and he turned it down, and they traded him to Las Vegas. Will he receive another deal like that from Las Vegas or anybody else? That remains to be seen. I think the one thing about Darnold that people still have a hard time realizing that he's only 27 years old. So he's not a 30-year-old quarterback retread. Yes, he's had a very unique start to his career. This is, I think, his 5th different team. It might be 6, but nonetheless, Sam Darnold gets an opportunity to start there. I think it's very clear that they moved on from veteran receivers, and now Jackson Smith and Jigba will be somebody to target in your fantasy leagues. He's the number 1 receiver. He is a potentially future star in this league, and we've seen glimpses of it. They have relied somewhat heavily on the run game in the past. Do they move to a little bit more up-tempo now? Kubiak, their offensive coordinator, and Darnold work together in San Francisco. That's part of the reason for this marriage. Should be more comfortable for Darnold, but they're going to have to protect him. He's not somebody that works well under pressure. So I have a hard time seeing where the Seattle Seahawks have success right away, but I do like the signing. I think it provides stability at the quarterback position.
Mike, they always like to say, like, a man with a plan, watch out, because that guy's probably going somewhere. I can always buy into an NFL franchise with a plan. You talk about the Seattle Seahawks. As you pointed out, they didn't want to spend all that money on Geno Smith. Plan B here, let's go after a quarterback that's going to be younger. We'll pay him a little bit less, and we'll see what we have in the future. We can get on the Vegas Raiders, which at another time, I don't think they had any plan whatsoever at the quarterback position and didn't solve it here. Let's talk about the New York Jets here. Justin Fields moves on from the Pittsburgh Steelers as a free agent to the New York Jets. I understand the plan here. We're not ready to win yet. We have a young, talented quarterback. If this is our franchise guy, we didn't give up any draft capital and didn't spend a ton of money to get said quarterback. Talk to us about the move from Fields saying, you know what? Pittsburgh, unless you're giving me the starting job, I don't want to be here. And the Jets probably told him, yeah, you're our quarterback number one.
Yes, I think that's well said, Donnie, and also very low risk for the Jets. If it doesn't work out after year one, there's 4 void years on the end of it. The cap hits are very low, and I just don't think it's a high risk at all. The Jets promised him the starting job week 1, but I don't really think, Donnie, they've promised him much more than that. The problem for the Steelers is that they promised a job to Russ Wilson before Fields ever took the field. Fields played fine. I don't think he played great. He played well enough to continue to play, but because this strange promise had been made before the season to Russ, and Russ takes over, has initial success, and then the Steelers fade at the end of the season yet again. So I understand why Fields would want to depart, because he doesn't feel like he can trust them. I think he probably liked the working relationship with Arthur Smith, but Tomlin overrode that in the middle of the year last year, so he moves on, and the Steelers are obviously going to have to look for other options. Russell Wilson's still on the table for them. Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Jones, other veteran quarterbacks are out there for them to take a look at. Would they take a huge swing with Kirk Cousins? I don't see it. I think Aaron Rodgers is a real possibility, but is he waiting for something else other than the Steelers? Steelers are a playoff team. Any of the names that I mentioned, I don't think it transforms them into the best team in their own division.
So that's the question, Blue. The Steelers are a playoff team. They have made the postseason 4 of the last 5 years with inconsistent quarterback play, even in the tail end of the Big Ben era. So you, as a Steelers faithful, what do you want the Steelers to do? What ultimately do you think Pittsburgh does at the quarterback spot?
I've said for some time, I do not think that they would sign up for the Aaron Rodgers drama, but the game of musical chairs, it's getting late in the song. So they're going to have to make a decision, and I don't know that you'd sign up for Russell Wilson again. I thought he was a good teammate last year, and Russ is prone to drama as well, but I don't think he provided any of that last year. I think I would go with Rodgers on a 1-year deal, and I think that's their most upside for 2025. But Daniel Jones long-term, that would be interesting to me. Problem is the Steelers' offensive line isn't very good, and that hurts Daniel Jones.
It will be really interesting to see Pittsburgh's playoff price, knowing the consistency of success, but hoping for more, of course, in the Steel City.